is, yeah, video session number 15. Yeah, this is S.W.A.T. session number 15. We are on page something or other. 47. Yeah, I'll need to keep that there. The principle of surprise. No. The principle of surprise. A. Definition of the principle of surprise: to strike the enemy at a time and or place and in a manner for which he is unprepared. Accomplish your purpose before your enemy can react effectively. You always want to be able to strike the enemy when he is unprepared. It is a much easier battle if the enemy is not ready for you. So whenever possible, you want to strike him at his weak point. You don't want to let him strike you at your weak point. You don't want to let him surprise you, and we'll get into this here. General Patton says, never attack where the enemy expects you to. And this was used to great advantage throughout World War II in many different areas of the conflict. One of the main ones is especially involving George Patton. Patton got himself in trouble on a regular basis. He was extremely successful as a tank commander. He was an extremely successful general, but he didn't get along with a lot of people, including generals and people of higher rank than him. So at one point he gets yanked off the field and told to sit in England while we prepare for D-Day. But then Eisenhower thought, you know, the Germans are really impressed with Patton. He was the only one who could stand up to Rommel. And the Germans are probably figuring whatever's going to happen to invade Europe, it's going to involve General Patton, because Patton is such a tremendous tactician on the ground. You would need somebody like that. So what Eisenhower did was he had Patton stationed at a particular location like Dover or something like that, and then he would have him drive up almost all the way to Scotland and take up a position there. By a position, I mean he had an office and he, did his paperwork and stuff. He was chafing because that's not where he wanted to be, but Eisenhower used him as a decoy, because every time he moved Patton, the German forces would all readjust on the border of France and Belgium there to think, okay, this is where the attack's coming from. No, this is where the attack's coming from. They actually truly never did expect the attack to really come at Normandy and those beaches there. They were expecting the attack to come at Calais, which is further west on the coast of the Channel there. So that surprise attack is always useful because it hits the enemy at a weak point where they're not prepared, and the time to prepare is never in battle. That is a horrible time to try and prepare for battle, is when you're in battle, and that's true throughout Christianity. You want to prepare before the enemy starts attacking you. That's really why we do seminars like this, is to get people prepared before the enemy starts to launch their attacks at them. Speed and deception are critical elements of victory. If the enemy knows what you are going to do and when and where you are going to do it, he then has the advantage, because he has your plans, but you don't have his. If you are going to hold an important meeting, he will cause other meetings or events to conflict with yours. If you're going to talk to a person a second time about their salvation, he may try to kill them before the planned meeting, or he may reinforce wrong beliefs through others just prior to your meeting. This actually happened to somebody I know who was talking to I think a classmate, because this was back when he was in college, and was talking to him, wanted him to get saved, and he invited him to his church, which is fine. But the guy was kind of on the fence about getting saved, and he said, well, why don't you come to church with me on Sunday? And the guy said, yeah, I'll come to church with you on Sunday. And by Friday, he was killed in either a car wreck or something. I can't remember right now. If you have the opportunity to talk to someone, seize the opportunity and press the advantage whenever you can. One nice thing about spiritual warfare, especially if you're just starting to get into it, is that in the beginning, anything will surprise the enemy because he's not expecting you to do anything. Most Christians don't do nothing. So whenever you do anything to combat the enemy, you're going to catch him by surprise, at least initially for a brief amount of time. He'll figure it out, and he'll start adapting to what's happening on the battlefield, basically. And by deception, we're not talking about lying. We're talking about don't let the enemy know what you are doing. Next page. No, next. I'm on the next page, but you're still there. B, the enemy's use of the principle of surprise. The enemy's use of the principle of surprise in individual combat. We have just discussed a couple of ways the enemy tries to thwart your plans. Let's look at his use of the principle of surprise. Scenario A. You plan to go to a person's house to talk to them about their blank. You fill in the blank, salvation, healing, etc. When you arrive, you begin with some small talk. Then just as you are beginning to get down to kingdom business, the doorbell rings and another person is shown in. The interruption throws you off for a second, but as you recover, you find out that the person is a friend or a relative of the person you are talking to and that they are a Jehovah's Witness. Now you find yourself off balance trying to fight a war on two fronts. The enemy has just used the element of surprise, of the principle of surprise. Usually the new person will try to take the initiative and lead or direct the conversation, either toward their own views of religion or toward a worldly topic. The target person will often tip the scale in their favor by immediately joining with them in the new topic. The enemy normally tries to use the principle of surprise to get you off guard just long enough to seize the initiative. It does not have to be a large surprise. It can be just the entrance of an added detail, as in the following scenario. And I don't know if any of you have experienced this type of scenario before, the first one. We certainly have, when we're talking to people, then all of a sudden someone else comes in. One of the things we do as life teams is we oftentimes will go, whenever possible, we go out in at least pairs, and sometimes 3 people at a time. We don't do more than that. More than that starts to you don't want people to feel intimidated, like they're being ganged up on. And when we do 3 people, we generally only have 2 people do the talking, and the one person holds back. Sometimes we just let one person do the talking, and 2 people hold back. One of the reasons for holding back is they can act as security, and if they see somebody coming up to interrupt, they can interrupt that person's interruption and start talking to them. And if you're making headway with this person over here, then I don't want to let their husband, wife, whatever, come and interrupt this, so I'll catch them and start talking to them and try and prevent them. I won't tackle them, but just keep them engaged so that they can't interrupt what's going on over here. Does that make sense? Scenario B, you have been witnessing to a coworker at your job. You have discussed a couple of biblical topics without getting too direct. Today you are tackling the topic of sin. During your examples of various kinds of sin, you mention homosexuality. At that point, the target, person you are dealing with, tells you that their child or friend, etc., is gay. The awkwardness of the moment is meant to put you on the defensive. It is meant to cause you to begin mentally analyzing the situation about the way you should handle the new information. Do you comment on it? Do you ignore it? Etc. One way to prevent this situation is to prepare for it. This should be done during the training time with your unit, the life team. More on this in section 2 below. We had someone in our life team actually go through this very specific problem. And yeah, she was caught off guard. So we did start talking about it. How do you handle this? How do you handle if you're witnessing to somebody, and because sometimes they will just bring it up. Well, my son, my daughter, not my husband, I hope, Unless it's a guy, my husband. But they'll bring it up and say, my child is gay. What do you think about it? How do you feel about it? Is homosexuality a sin? And you need to think about that before you go out and do outreach, and you need to come up with an answer that works for you. And the answer that I have might be different than how you would say it, so that's why I'm saying you need an answer that feels natural, that you can just automatically say. A lot of times Curry will say about homosexuality that, yeah, I was a sinner too before I got saved. So we're not putting down this particular sin. We're just saying, yeah, everybody was a sinner before they got saved. Sometimes they'll point out, well, they were homosexual from birth, or something like that, and it says, well, everybody's a sinner from birth. There are different ways to handle it, but it is worthwhile, especially in this day and age, to have some answers for stuff like this, so that you're not caught off guard. You're not caught by surprise, and literally there will become a silence as you're trying to figure, how do I handle this? And the person who said it can see that on your face. And then it becomes, you're not sharing the love of God, you're trying to share your religious doctrine. And you're trying to reword it so it doesn't offend him. So this is one of the good reasons why we do life teams. We can train people to know what to say in difficult situations like that. Okay? The principle of surprise can also be used by the enemy in the following scenario. Scenario C, just as you are leaving your house to go to pray for a sick person, your boss calls to tell you that an important file has been apparently deleted and you may have to work on it, setting you back a week or more. The importance of the file will determine how much your mind is displaced while you minister to the sick. Often the missing item will be found shortly after you minister, on a lower level than you would have ministered. Many of the uses of the principle of surprise can be likened to a sucker punch. This does happen, particularly to ministers or teachers or people like that. I never answer my phone. I don't look at my phone when I'm teaching for that reason. Because anything that happens during the day can probably be handled tonight. I don't have to look at it. Part of the problem is it's constantly going off with spam calls and spam texts, and so by now I'm very used to ignoring it. But even before that, you don't want to be distracted. You want to stay focused. We're here for a purpose. We're here for a reason. I take it seriously. I know you guys take it seriously, so we want to stay focused. We don't let anything else come along and distract us. The enemy's use of the principle of surprise in corporate warfare. The enemy's use of the principles of surprise in corporate warfare is similar to individual warfare. It is the introduction of a fact or situation that is not necessarily intended to take you out. It is merely intended to divide your attention so that you operate on a lower level of effectiveness. It is essential that you train using role-playing so that you cannot be surprised. And you should learn to disconnect from earthly things from the time you begin your mission until the operation is over. The disconnect works well until your mind is renewed enough and you are dead enough that things do not upset or offset you. Flexibility is a key attribute in overcoming the principle of surprise. Below are a few ways the enemy uses the principle of surprise in a corporate warfare situation. These all happen during a typical church service. 1. A loud power surge causes a loud squelch. We've already experienced that several times here. It usually takes upwards of 10 minutes before everyone is again at the same place spiritually that they were before the sound. Since most churches are on a time crunch, this can stop more important things from being done later. If the leader of the service is shakeable or soulishly emotionally oriented, it may cause them to abandon their original direction and revert back to a previous message, one he has given before because he can give it without too much thought. You must become unshakable. The opposite tactic attached to this principle is that all the electricity goes off. You must also have a plan for such situations and train the congregation in how to react or not react as the case may be. It's important for a church, we were trained a long time ago not to react. Didn't matter if you heard banging or if the lights went out, if the power went out, even if somebody started manifesting or something. We had ushers and elders and deacons that could handle situations. So it became very common for us. It didn't matter. I could hear screaming behind me, and I would still keep my focus on the minister and his preaching at the time, because I knew someone else has been assigned the task of taking care of those things. Eventually I was an usher, and that was my job. But you have to become unshakable. It's all discipline, basically. You're disciplining yourself not to be distracted. We're going to go through a number of these different distractions. Every distraction is a surprise attack, because you're not expecting the distraction. If you were expecting it, it wouldn't be a distraction. Number 2, a person well known to many of the congregation may show up, quote, fashionably late. Possibly a local celebrity or a person of some notoriety, well-known drug dealer, the mayor, TV news person. Soon all those that know who the person is will be telling all those who do not know who they are. Yeah, I hear all the yups. Oh yeah. You just hear the murmur start at this side of the church, and it goes all the way across. Note, some arrive late on purpose because they want to be seen and noticed, and some arrive late so that they can sneak in unnoticed. Both are ploys used by the enemy to upset the flow. Everyone in the service must become unshakable. 3, an extremely ill person may come into the service with equipment, oxygen, etc. Or they may be brought in on a stretcher. If they come in a wheelchair, then the attention will be significantly influenced by the severity of their visual condition. The more unusual they look, the longer it takes to return the service to normal. Parents may have to explain the situation to their children. You must train the congregation to become unshakable. 4, a person may manifest a devil. They may begin to scream or make unusual sounds. Because of the sterility of most churches and church services, this usually leads to an awkward moment while the minister tries to figure out what to do, ignore it, cast it out, run out of the door by the baptistry, etc. I actually had a situation in a DHT that we were doing. I had been talking to this was a woman who was sitting on the front row, kind of where Judy's sitting. No. She had talked to me a couple of times during breaks about different issues in her life and things that she needed. Frankly, right now, I can't remember what the issues were. I try not to anyway. I just go on. But we try to address them. I didn't specifically pray for her right then, but as I was teaching the DHT and covering a particular topic that kind of had an arrow pointing right to this situation that she was dealing with, she starts crying, and she starts bawling and just goes on the floor crying. And literally for a split second, I thought of, do I go over there and lay hands on her? What do we do? And the Lord just quickened to me, just keep going. So I just kept talking, and I said, don't worry, she's fine. She'll be all right. And it only took probably less than a minute. And I just kept talking, and then she got herself together, sat back in her chair, and she was delivered. That actually was her deliverance. I talked to her after that, the rest of the conference. She was a different person. So there are times where something like this, all you have to do is let the Lord deal with it. You know. Number 5, the last tactic of the enemy we will discuss is sometimes the most effective. The name Beelzebub means the Lord of the Flies. It is amazing to watch the reaction of children and adults if one fly or a similar pest enters a church service. Usually, you might as well make a game out of it and reward the person that kills the thing, because nothing else will regain the people's attention and keep it until the intruder is dead. And dead, not just gone, because the people will keep looking for its return or wonder where it is. They must see the thing die a horrible death. And we've all experienced that before. We've seen, and everyone's looking. And what's worse is the bee or a wasp or something, because then they're not just looking, they're going. And it just. I wasn't there this time, but I heard of this years ago. They were having a church service in a barn. This is up in South Dakota and on a farm. And pastor's up there, he's preaching, everybody's sitting on hay bales. It's cowboy church time, And pastor's there, he's preaching, and a fly flies into his mouth. And all he does is and just keeps preaching. He was unshakable. The people were unshakable. That's the way you got to be. Just The Christian's use of the principle of surprise. Number 1, the Christian's use of the principle of surprise in individual combat. The Christian's use of the principle of surprise can take many forms, but the most simple, effective, and direct use is to simply stop randomly, or better yet, every time they see a person with a need and minister. If the Christian stops every time, the element of surprise may not last long, but the desired effect of setting the captive free is still working. Be sure to stay focused. Do not let a person pull you from the mission or topic. You may employ surprise also by starting a discussion with a stranger on one topic, and as soon as they are engaged, switching the conversation to spiritual matters. Some of you may remember Brenda. She came down with us a couple of times to introduce the sessions. Brenda is our life team leader now. She was our leader in training at the time. She's her own life team leader. And she is excellent at this. She can start a conversation with anybody. Doesn't matter age, size, whatever. She will talk to them, and she will always bring it around to the topic of the gospel. And she can do it in 10 seconds flat. We've watched her. I'm just amazed at how good she is, how smooth she is. It's just natural for her. You can work at it and you can get better at it, certainly. But she's a natural. She's fun to watch. Pardon me? She is an awesome lady. We're very appreciative.
2 sessions ago.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She left an impression on me when it was my first one.
Everywhere she goes, she leaves an impression. Number 2, the Christian's use of the principle of surprise in corporate warfare. The Christian's use of the principle of surprise in corporate warfare is generally practiced by the minister, having a list of topics and persons for which prayer, intercession, and warfare is to be made. The minister must scramble the order so that the element of surprise is maintained. There should be no perceived order in either people or method. Switch from warfare to praise, to intercession, and from person to person. You may desire to break up the service by going from prayer to ministry to the sick. The service leader should maintain eye contact with everyone in the congregation, no closed eye praying. By using hand signals and voice commands, the leader should direct the level or volume, intensity, type, English or tongues, and object of prayer. There are lots of different ways to use the element or the principle of surprise. On a church level basis or a corporate basis, you can also just change the order of service. You know, people get so used to, okay, here we are, it's 10 o'clock, we're going to have 30 minutes of worship, we're going to have 40 minutes of preaching, we're going to have 20 minutes of prayer, or maybe another song, and then we're all going to Cracker Barrel, right? Break it up. Do worship at the end. Start with a message. That'll catch everybody off guard who's used to coming in late because they don't like the worship service. You can do it in a number of different ways. I knew a guy who preached to a small church, and this was a kind of a ethnic church, and all the people that came in would all sit in the back rows. He'd have nobody up front. And one day, he started the service by picking up the pulpit, carrying it to the back of the church, turning it around, and preaching to all of them. Now they were in the front. And ever since then they broke it up, and they started sitting in different places and stuff like that. But you can do things to catch people off guard, and what you're doing is also catching the enemy off guard. We planned an outreach in Jacksonville. This was a famous outreach. We were going to train our people how to do outreach. I had picked a apartment building. It was 55 years of age and older in this apartment building. That was the requirement. So I'm thinking, okay, we've got old people in here. Old people have pets. They're out walking their dogs, walking their cats, or whatever. We'll be able to interact with a lot of old people. Old people always have sicknesses and diseases and pains and stuff like that, as a general rule. I know no old people in here, because there's no old people in here, right? Okay. So I had picked this place, thought this would be a target-rich environment. It would be a good way to train all of our people. And we had, you had 4, I had 4, they had about 6, so we had about 14, 15 people that we were doing. And we met at the public library, which was a few blocks away from this place, and got everybody together, said, here we go, we're going to go over there, we're going to do this is great. We drive over there. Okay, I'm in the lead because I know where it is. But we gave everybody the address anyway. And we pull in there, and I discover this apartment building has all interior corridors. So there's no way you're going to knock on somebody's door, or even. And I'm looking all around this apartment building. It's like the rapture happened. Everybody's gone. There is no one in the parking lot. There is no one walking around. There is no one coming in and out of the one door to the place. And I thought, well, this isn't going to work very well. And one group of about 6 people, they were in a different car, couldn't find the place, and they drove somewhere else. They drove to some other apartment building. So I said, okay, well, let's do something different. We're all here. We're going to do outreach. Let's go across the street. Walmart's across the street. We're going to hit Walmart. Called the other people. They said, hey, we're over at this other apartment building. There's a bunch of people. We're going to do over here. I said, okay, great. You do that. We had great success because the enemy had already cleared out that one apartment building of anybody that could possibly benefit from our being there. But by the element of surprise, and we actually were not planning on using the element of surprise, but it just, you seize the initiative when it's there. Sherry took a bunch, 3 or 4 women. They went through the interior of Walmart. She has a good story about that. Maybe she'll tell it after lunch. I was outside in the parking lot with 3 guys, and we just hit the whole parking lot. There was a cop there. We went up to the cop car and told him what we were doing, asked if we could pray for him. He said, yeah, boy, I could always use prayer. So we prayed for the policeman. We saw some healings, arthritis, other things, just wandering around the parking lot, talking to people, praying for him. It was funny. I'm there training people. So I'm trying to talk to them and say, this is how you do it. You go up, you talk to them, you pray for them. One of the guys that was there, first person he goes to, and this was a car wash that was in the corner of the parking lot. And there's just a bunch of guys sitting around outside the car wash, and one of them had one of these big gold chains and a gold cross on it. It's like this big, hanging from his chest. So we go up and start talking to him, and kind of talked to him for a little bit, started sharing the gospel with him, and the guy that I'm training, he goes, we pray for people and God heals them. Do you have anything that you need prayer for? He says, well, yeah, I've got my bad knee. He says, well, Matt over here, he can pray for you. So I did, and then later I explained to him, this is not how this works. Yeah. But the people at the other apartment building were having great success. They were knocking on doors. They were talking to people. They may have gotten somebody saved. This was one of in that group was a father and two of his sons. And this was I had trained him before at a shopping center, and he had never done this before, never done outreach, and he wanted to. So I got him started at the shopping center a few weeks before this, and now he came. He was wonderful. He was talking to everybody. His sons were talking to people. Later that day, they went and found another apartment building so that they could do more of this. They just were thrilled, and they're doing great. So the principle of surprise really, really does work. It can be, whenever you can seize the initiative, seize the initiative. Let's keep going here to the principle of the offensive. That's on page 51. Actually, in my notes here for the principle of surprise, this is something that we've talked about with the principle of mass. Recognize what it is. This is how to handle a surprise attack. If you're the subject of one, recognize it for what it is. Just like any of these types of attacks, any of these principles, recognize them for what they are. You're always in some state of warfare with the enemy. You may have just finished a battle. You may be preparing for the next battle. You may be in the middle of the battle. But you're always in a state of warfare. It is just the way it is. This is what we've been called to. And we are always in a state of victory. We always fight from a position of victory. But always recognize it for what it is. Especially with a surprise attack, a lot of times he's doing a surprise attack because he's afraid to confront you with a mass attack. He's trying to sneak up on you. So double down on your focus. Get mad, go on the attack. Learn how to focus. Go back and listen to Mind Renewal. Learn how to focus. Learn how to eliminate distractions from your brain so that you just fill up on God's Word and direct God's Word to the problem. Mind Renewal. Mind Renewal. It's a seminar that we do. You can see it online. Curry teaches it. I added jglmmedia.com onto the board outside there. You can get free messages from JGLM. There's 20 of them. All of the main series, the DHT, New Man, Mind Renewal, S.W.A.T, and Demons and Deliverance are all available for free. You can listen to them. Or if you want to subscribe to the channel, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can get all of the messages. jglmmedia.com, and then look under Open Resources. I wrote it down on the board out front. Okay, the principle of the offensive. Definition of the principle of the offensive: seize, retain, and exploit the initiative. War, once declared, must be waged offensively and aggressively. The enemy must not be fended off, but smitten down. The only way you win a war, you don't win a war with defense. You win a war with offense. You must be aggressive. That really was the biggest fault of the Vietnam War, is the military was hamstrung by the politicians and prevented from waging war aggressively and offensively. Talking to the North Vietnamese later, after the war was over, they said, and I forget the particular battle, they said, at that point, we knew we had already lost. We were just hanging on, and then you guys gave up. The enemy must not just be fended off. We're not trying to hold him back. We're trying to knock him out. Faith is action, and action is everything, because without action, you have nothing. Faith is action. That's a good way to remember it, because faith without works is dead. The person who commits himself to a continuous action in the vigorous pursuit of his goals will always advance his cause above the fellow who delays in the hope that something will turn up. Always be ready, always be doing something. Let us then be up and doing with a heart to every fate. That's a line from a poem that I remember from growing up. But it gets back to a good plan executed violently today is better than a perfect plan next week. It's better to be doing something and executing at least a good plan right now than waiting for something that you hope will be better or hope will be perfect. If you're actually executing, you've got the opportunity and the chance to actually accomplish the task right then, right now. And if there's something better turns up later, hey, that's icing on the cake. But you don't wait. When you wait, you're giving the enemy time to regroup. You're giving advantage to the enemy when you wait. We don't wait to hit the enemy. We hit him as soon and as fast and as hard as we can. The common teaching concerning the leading of the Spirit is wrong, harmful, and arbitrarily enforced. The essential elements of the principle of the offensive include attack, disperse, regroup, and attack again. Continually attack. A motto for this principle would be audacity, audacity, and always audacity. Many people wait for the leading of the Spirit before they actually go and do something. And what they don't realize is that the Spirit of the Lord is waiting for them to actually go and do something. The Spirit is our helper, correct? Parakletos is the Greek word, right? That means helper, or someone called alongside to help, right? There's some other definitions in there, but I'm going to concentrate on these. The helper aspect. It's also comforter, and it's lawyer on occasion. But a helper, your helper is not the person who leads the way. Your helper is the one who helps you lead the way. Does that make sense? So many people will sit and say, I'm going to wait for the leading of the Lord so I know what to do, because I don't want to do it wrong, because if I do it wrong, I'm in trouble and the Lord's going to judge me. That's quite literally most often their mindset. But they sit and say, I'm going to wait for the leading of the Lord. I'm going to wait for the leading of the Holy Spirit. People will do outreach. I don't know if you've ever heard of treasure hunts. There are some ministries that have made that concept popular. And like a lot of things, I'm not necessarily against treasure hunts, but I don't think they really serve the purpose that they think they're serving. The concept of a treasure hunt is everyone gets together, they pray, they ask the Lord for words of knowledge. In the case of, they see something or the Lord quickens something to them about a person, it might be a type of clothing they're wearing or the color of the shirt. It could be the name of a city. It could be, a Christmas tree. It could be any number of different things that they feel from the Spirit. and then they go out into the community and try and find people that line up with whatever that is, that the person's wearing the particular clothes, or his last name is Sullivan or something. And they say, well, the Lord sent me to pray for you. Well, that gets people out a lot of times doing something, which is better than nothing. But in searching for these people that match their particular word of knowledge, they've gone past who knows how many people that need healing, that need deliverance, that need the gospel. And we're not called to do treasure hunts. We're called to be ministers of reconciliation, ministers of the gospel. We're there to preach the gospel, to teach all nations, make disciples of all nations. So I appreciate, and the Spirit of the Lord can tell you, talk to this person. That's fine. If he does, go for it. The Spirit of the Lord will rarely tell you, don't talk to that person. That's more, 1 out of 100 or something. That's rare. I mean, the Spirit of the Lord told Paul, don't go into Asia, go into Macedonia. Paul was going. That's the important part of that story. Paul was already going to go. He was going everywhere. And he tried going into Asia and kept bonking his head against the Holy Spirit till he figured out, okay, I'm supposed to go over here. That's understandable. But be going. Always be going. Paul always went. So does that make sense about the leading of the Spirit has been, I don't want to say twisted, it's been abused by many ministries and with people that don't really understand the Spirit of the Lord. The Spirit of the Lord is there to help you do the thing that has already been commanded to you to do. You've been commanded to go out and heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead. You've been commanded to be a minister of reconciliation. The Spirit doesn't have to lead you to do that which is commanded. The general does not take the soldier's hand and lead him to where he's supposed to be doing the shooting. The general is there to give commands, and then he is supposed to obey the commands. Does that make sense? Continually attack. The righteous are as bold as a lion, it says. Napoleon said, fortune favors the bold. By maintaining the initiative, we're still on page 51. By maintaining the initiative, the commander preserves his freedom of action and enhances the morale of his troops. Everybody likes to be on the winning side. By maintaining the initiative, you're taking action. You're on the winning side. You're not playing defense. Nobody wants to be hit and be backed up against a wall or back up against the ropes if you're a boxer. It improves morale and makes you actually makes you a better target, but we'll deal with that in a minute. Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped down too far. It enhances the morale of his troops. When the enemy has seized the initiative through the offensive, it will limit your mobility, it will enhance the enemy's morale, and make you a better target. The principle of the offensive must be applied to both offensive and defensive actions. An offensive attitude must be maintained in defensive operations because prolonged and passive defense breeds unrest, lowers morale, and surrenders the advantage of intangibles to the enemy. An active defense conducted in an offensive manner keeps the enemy off balance, restricts his ability to attack, and enhances security. Any leader adhering to the principle of the offensive sets the pace and determines the course of battle, exploits enemy weakness, and is better prepared to capitalize on unexpected developments because they are already in motion. We were talking about boxing and fighting. If you're a boxer, if you're moving backwards away from your opponent and you try and hit, you've got very little force because you've already got momentum in the wrong direction. If you're moving forward and you hit, Now it's not just the momentum and the weight or mass of your fist and your arm. You've got your whole body behind it. Courage is essential to success in all activities that call for risk and daring. The most essential qualities of a general will always be, first, a high moral courage, capable of great resolution. Second, a physical courage which takes no account of danger. A high moral courage. The most effective generals are the ones that have very high morals and stick to them. They're not shaken off of their decisions to hold to certain principles. They have a high moral courage. They're capable of great resolutions. Does anybody understand what most people think resolutions? Those are things I do on January 1st when I think I'm going to eat better and exercise more. We have a friend who used to work at the Target warehouse, and he said in December they were busy shipping out of the frozen food department trailer loads of lean cuisine and healthy choice and all of these good low-calorie meals to all the different Target stores. Because January 1st, everybody starts buying them because they're going to eat better. That's not the resolution we're talking about, because that's a resolution that's really, that's probably one of the worst uses of that term, resolution. Some people may not realize in the Oval Office, the desk of the president there is made out of wood, and it's made out of the wood of a ship called the Resolute. The name of the ship was Resolute, and it's often referred to as the Resolute desk. It was given to the United States by England. The ship was an English ship. The term resolute means unyielding, unshakable, unequivocating. It cannot, resolute gives the idea of being so firm that, as it says in Scripture, your forehead is an adamant harder than flint. You don't change for anybody. Generals are capable of great resolution. They make a decision and they stick with that decision. They don't change. They plan it out, they do all the research needed, but when they make the decision, that's it. They resolve, which is where that word comes from. They resolve to go forward with that decision, and they don't go backward. They have a physical courage which takes no account of danger. We can think of many generals throughout the history of the United States, from General Washington to General Lee to General Stonewall Jackson to some of the generals of World War II. Patton is kind of in his own realm as far as that goes, but there are other generals. I forget the name of the guy. The Germans wanted him to surrender, and because he was surrounded. This is during the Battle of the Bulge. I wish I can remember his name. They said, you know, they're insisting on the fact that he surrender, and his men were saying, you know, we should surrender. We're surrounded. He said, that's the best thing if we're surrounded. Anywhere we shoot, we're going to hit somebody. And he won. He won the battle. There are some great stories of battles like this. Another general, when the Germans insisted that he surrender, he just sent a one-word answer back. Nuts. I ain't surrendering for nothing. And they won because they stuck with it. They were resolute. They had great resolve. And that communicates all the way down. Every organization takes on the character of the head of the organization. We've seen that throughout the corporate world. We see that through politics. We see that in churches. We see that in ministries. That whatever the character is of the leader of the organization, the whole organization takes on that character over time. So let's take a lunch break there, and we'll come back to the principle of the offensive on page 52, and we'll start with the enemy's use of the principle of the offensive. Are you getting something out of this here this morning?
Yeah.
Okay.